everybody, this is the classwork that we did on chapter 2. We did it right at the end of chapter 2, and we've got some word problems, and these are video solutions to that classwork, and it's posted on Canvas if you need to know exactly what that classwork looks like. These are the solutions. The numbers 1 and 2 are word problems. So just make sure you are reading the classwork and you've got it in front of you so that you can see what's going on with these two problems. Tyrone leaves City A on a moped traveling towards City B at 18 miles per hour. At the same time, Tina leaves City B on a bicycle traveling towards City A at 14 miles per hour. The distance between the two cities is 112 miles. How long will it take before Tyrone and Tina meet? So lots of things going on in this problem. We are starting in two different cities. So here is City A and here is City B. Okay? The distance between these two cities is 112 miles. Okay? So the distance between City A and City B is a total of 112 miles. Okay? So we have Tyrone. He is leaving City A and he is traveling towards City B, and he is traveling on a moped at 18 miles per hour. Then we have Tina leaving from City B, and she is traveling towards City A. She is riding on a bicycle and she is traveling 14 miles per hour. So basically what we want to know is how long does it take until they have met each other? So Tyrone is moving this direction and Tina is moving this direction. Tyrone is traveling a little bit faster than Tina, so he will travel a little bit further than Tina does. Now, the formula that we are most used to using is rate is equal to distance divided by time. But we also use a variation of this. If we just multiply time times both sides, we end up with rate times time equals distance. And we have the distance, we have their rates, and so we are just trying to determine what time it is that passes before they meet each other. So we know that Tyrone is traveling at 18 miles per hour. So he's traveling 18 miles per hour, and he is going to travel the same amount of time as Tina. Tina is traveling at 14 miles per hour, and she will travel the same amount of time as Tyrone. And added together, they are going to travel 112 miles. So the equation that we're working with is 18t, and that distance right there is Tyrone's distance, because rate times time is equal to distance. 14t is how far Tina has traveled, and together they are traveling 112 miles. Now we only have one unknown, which is our t, and so we are going to add these two together. We get 32t equals 112. We divide both sides by 32. Okay, and when we divide both sides by 32, we end up with 3.5. Okay, so they have traveled 3.5 hours until they meet up. Some students were getting confused on how to do that division. So let me just show you how to do that division right over here. 112 is going to go in the box. 112 is going to go in the box. And 32 is going to go outside the box. 32 won't go into 1, won't go into 11, but it will go into 112, and it'll go 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. I'm going to subtract And when I do subtract that, I get 16. Now I can keep dividing, so I put a 0 there. And 32 doesn't go into 16, but it does go into 160. And it goes 5 times. So 5 times 32 does give me 160. So I end up with 3.5. And so that is how I do the division on this. But my final answer here is 3.5 hours. Okay, now be sure you're looking at the classwork and the word problem written out on the classwork. 2 airplanes leave Chicago at the same time and fly in opposite directions. If one travels at 450 miles per hour and the other travels at 550 miles per hour, how long will it take them to be 4,000 miles apart? So this one is very similar to the one that we just did. It looks a little bit different, but it is very similar. So here I am in Chicago. I have a plane flying this direction, and I have a plane flying this direction. So they are flying in opposite directions. One of the planes is traveling 450 miles per hour. The other plane is traveling 550 miles per hour. Okay, what we want to know is how long is it going to take them to be a total of 4,000 miles apart. So again, the formula that we are going to use is rate times time equals our distance. And we are going to add the rate times the time of our first plane plus the rate times the time of our second plane, and that is going to equal 4,000 miles. Okay, so this is plane 1, and this is plane 2. And because we know our total distance, we can figure that out. So plane 1 is traveling 550 miles per hour, and it's traveling the same amount of time as plane 2. We just don't know what that time is, and that's what we're figuring out. Plane 2 is traveling 450 miles per hour. And it is also traveling the same amount of time as plane 1. And together they're traveling 4,000 miles. So I add 550t plus 450t, and I get 1,000t equals 4,000. I divide by 1,000, and I have t equals 4. So in 4 hours, my plane will be 4,000 miles apart. Now we are moving into equations. So we are going to solve this equation for x. First thing I do is I'm going to distribute my 3. 3 times 2x is 6x. 3 times -1 is -3. Or now I'm going to distribute my -2. So I have -2x minus 10, because remember, I have to distribute that negative to both. And students sometimes forget that. And then my last, I am distributing -1 to both of these. So I have -1x plus 3. My next step right here is I have to take my 6x and my -2x, and I'm going to combine those. So I'm left with 4x. I'm also going to combine my -3 and my -10. -3 and -10 give me -13. So I'm left with 4x minus 13 equals -1x plus 3. Now I am going to add 1x to both sides. I'm left with 5x minus 13 equals 3. I add 13 to both sides. I have 5x equals 16. So my final answer here is x equals 16 over 5. That's my final answer for number 3. So let's move on to number 4. Okay, things are a little bit more complicating now. The first thing that I like to deal with is I like to deal with this negative right here. Okay, students forget that this negative belongs to everything in my numerator. And I just go ahead and I change that to a plus, and then I'm going to go ahead and distribute my negative across there. Once I do that, I will have dealt with that negative and I don't have to worry about losing it. So I have 5x plus 2 over 3 plus negative 2x minus 4 over 6. And if students made a mistake on this, it typically had something to do with that negative right there and not going ahead and dealing with it. Now that I've dealt with that negative, now I'm going to multiply everything by my LCD. So I have 3 and I have a 6 for this one right here. And then I have another 3. So my LCD that I'm going to multiply everything by is 6 over 1. So I have 6 over 1 times 5x plus 2 over 3. And you better go ahead and put a parenthesis around that, or else you might forget. So now, my next one, I've got 6 over 1 times negative 2, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in parentheses, negative 2x minus 4 over 6 equals negative 4 over 3 times 6 over 1. Okay, now I'm going to start canceling things or simplifying. 3 and 6, 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 6 twice. So I have 2 times 5x plus 2. Okay, my 6's cancel. So I'm left with negative 2x minus 4, and I don't have anything that I have to distribute there. So I could remove those parentheses right now. And then that's going to be equal to negative 8. My 3 and my 6 cross cancel. My 3 becomes a 1, my 6 becomes a 2. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Now I've got 2 times 5x, so that's going to be 10x. 2 times 2 is 4, so I'm distributing. Then I've got negative 2x minus 4 equals negative 8. I'm going to combine like terms, so I have 10x, negative 2x, so that's going to give me 8x. Okay, then I have 4 and negative 4, so that cancels. So I'm left with 8x equals negative 8. I divide both sides by 8, and my answer here is x equals negative 1. And that is my final answer for number 4. Number 5 is asking us to solve for y. So I have 2 over 3x minus 3 over 4y equals 2. Now, the way that I solved this is I went ahead and multiplied everything by its LCD. Okay? Now, my LCD is going to be 12 because that 2 is over 1. So I'm multiplying everything by 12. So I have 12 over 1 times 2/3 x. Okay. Then I am going to make this plus negative 3/4 y. Okay, because I know that I might lose my negative. So I am multiplying that times 12 over 1. Okay, and that is set equal to 2 over 1. And I am multiplying times 12 over 1. Okay, whoops, sorry about that. So now I'm going to start cross-canceling. My 3 goes into 3 one time. It goes into 12 4 times. So then I'm left with 8x. 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 12 3. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9y. And then I'm left with 24. Okay, I'm solving for y. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 8x from both sides. I have negative 9y equals negative 8x. And I put the x first because we are used to solving for and putting in y equals mx plus b. All this said is to solve for y. So some students put 24 minus 8x, and that's completely fine. My next step is to divide by negative 9. So then I'm left with y equals negative 8x plus 24 over negative 9. And because the directions said solve for y, this is an acceptable answer. But many of us are in the habit of putting things in slope-intercept form. And you might get 8 over 9x, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive, minus 24 over 9. Now that minus 24 over 9 can be simplified even further. And so it becomes 8 over 9x minus 8 over 3. Now, if you got this as an answer, I would accept it because the directions just say solve for y. It does not say put into slope-intercept form. Or if you got this for an answer, I would accept it. Okay? Now, I want to show you a second way on how to solve this problem because I had a lot of students do it this second way. And so this is one acceptable way, and now I'm going to show you another acceptable way. So I'm going to erase this. So if you need to pause it, go ahead and pause it. Okay, so now I'm just going to erase. Now, if you don't want to multiply everything by the LCD, what you could do is you could just start working with your fractions. So I have 2/3 x minus 3/4 y equals 2. So I'm solving for x, so I'm going to subtract 2/3 from both sides. Okay, so I'm subtracting 2/3 x from both sides. Then I'm left with negative 3/4 y equals negative 2/3 x plus 2. Okay? So, at this point, I've got to get my y by itself. So what I have to do to get my y by itself is I've got to multiply by the reciprocal of this fraction. I'm multiplying by the reciprocal of this fraction. And the reciprocal of that is negative 4 over 3. So when I multiply negative 3 over 4 by negative 4 over 3, that is all going to cancel out. And I'm going to be left with positive 1 in front of that y. But if I multiply this side by negative 4 over 3, you know how it goes. We have to also multiply the other side by negative 4 over 3. So here I've got negative 4 over 3 times negative 3 over 4. And I'm going to multiply everything on this side times that. Okay, so I am going to have to distribute this negative 4 over 3. Okay, so I'm going to have negative 4 over 3 times negative 2/3 x. Okay, then I'm also going to have it times negative 4 over 3 times 2. And that's 2 over 1. Okay, so over here, everything cancels out and I'm left with y. But on the right-hand side, I will have negative 4 times negative 2, which is positive 8. Then I have 9 in the denominator. Negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. 3 times 3 is 9. So I'm left with 8 9's x. Then I'm left with minus 8 over 3. Now I get exactly the same thing, but I just wanted you to realize that that's another way that it can be done. Okay? Now, let's move on to inequalities. So my next one says 8 minus 2 over 6 minus 8 plus 3 over 9 is greater than minus 1 over 2. So I'm still going to multiply everything by an LCD. So I've got to find the LCD of 6, 9, and 2. Okay? You definitely don't want to multiply 6, 9, and 2 together to get your LCD because that will be a very big number. Start thinking about multiples of 6, multiples of 9. Okay? Your LCD is 18 because 6 times 3 is 18. 9 times 2 is 18, and 2 times 9 is 18. 18 is divisible by 6, 9, and 2, all evenly. So what I am multiplying by here is 18 over 1. So I'm going to have 18 over 1 times x minus 2 over 6. Okay, now I need to go ahead and deal with this negative. I'm going to take this minus and I'm going to make it a plus, but I've got to give that negative to everything in my numerator. So I'm actually going to end up with negative x minus 3. So that's going to be negative in front of the x and a negative in front of the 3. So when I multiply this by 18 over 1, I am multiplying it, because I had to distribute that negative, I'm multiplying it times negative x minus 3. Okay, because you don't want to lose that minus sign. And that is something that we forget to do a lot. And the last thing that I am multiplying it by is negative 1/2. So that's going to be 18 over 1. My next step is to cross cancel. So 6 goes into 6 one time. 6 goes into 18 3 times. So I have 3 times x minus 2. 9 goes into 9 one time. 9 goes into 18 twice. So then I am left with 2. I already distributed that negative. So that I've got 2 times negative x minus 3. And greater than, 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 18 9 times. And so then I'm left with negative 9. I'm going to do some distribution. So I have 3x minus 6 plus, and actually that's going to be negative at this point. So I've got positive 2 times negative x. So it's going to be negative 2x minus 6 is greater than negative 9. My 3x and my minus 2x are on the same side of my equation, so I go ahead and combine those. Negative 6 and negative 6 is going to give me negative 12, and that's greater than negative 9. My last step is to add 12 to both sides, and I'm left with x is greater than 3. Okay, now I want to go ahead and put that on a number line. So here's 0. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here is a positive 3, and it's greater than, so I'm going to go to greater, or I'm going to go to infinity. And so once I put this in interval notation, I start at 3, and then I go all the way to infinity. So my final answer is, in interval notation, is 3 to infinity. Okay. Number 7 is an and. It's an and, so we're going to focus on that. Think about this. This is an inequality, and this is an inequality. Okay, so it's really two inequalities put together. The best way to solve this is to solve it all at the same time. Okay, but instead of dealing with two sides of an inequality, we have 3 areas that we're going to deal with. This is area, or this is really area 1. That's the area that we focus on. But then whatever we do to the middle area, we have to also do to the left-hand side and the right-hand side. So I want to get my x by itself in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides, or from all 3 areas. My x in the middle is now isolated. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. 5 minus 4 is positive 1. So my answer to this, because it's an and, means that my answer has to be greater than negative 2 and less than 1. So my answer is going to look like this. At negative 2, I'm going to have a parentheses, and at positive 1, I'm going to have a parentheses. And then it goes in between those two numbers. So all numbers in between negative 2 and 1 are my solution. So this is a compound inequality using the word and. Compound inequality using the word and. Now we're going to do a compound inequality using the word or. So when we had the and, it meant that my number had to be both greater than negative 2 and less than 1. But when I use the or, when my inequality is the or inequality, it can meet either. So my answer can be greater than a certain number or less than a certain number. So I am going to go ahead and start solving this. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. I'm left with 3x is less than negative 3. I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and I get x is less than negative 1. I'm going to solve the second inequality. So I subtract 2 from both sides. I'm left with 3x is greater than negative 1. I divide both sides by 3, and my answer here is x is greater than negative 1/3. Now I am using the word or. I'm using the word or. So when I graph my inequality, it just has to be either. It can be either one. Okay? So for x is less than negative 1, I'm going to put a parenthesis at negative 1. It's less than, so I'm going towards negative infinity. My second one is x is greater than negative 1/3. So I start right here, and I go towards positive infinity. So when I put that in interval notation, I have negative infinity to negative 1. And then I have a union negative 1/3 to positive infinity. Okay, and that is it for the classwork. So hopefully this helps you to understand some of those problems.